Hey everybody, welcome back to the shop. This is Todd with Industrial Comfort. In today's video, I'm going to show you how to make this really cool rustic mountain wall art. Now I'll warn you, it takes a little bit of patience, but the results are fantastic. Let me show you how I did it. Now for this project, you're going to need a project board and the wood to fill in your project board. Now a project board is generally a 2 foot by 2 foot or a 2 foot by 4 foot piece of plywood. Now these come in anywhere from 1/4 inch, which is what this is, all the way up to 3/4 of an inch. I would highly recommend using a 1/4 inch, as you really don't need that much material on the back and you don't want to create too much weight with anything larger. Now for the wood that we're going to use, I happen to have a bunch of scrap barn wood that I got up in Vermont that I've resawed. Now, if you don't have a bandsaw, resawing wood probably is not going to be an option for you. So you can use pallet wood. You can use really any scrap wood you have. You can use cut down 2x4s. Entirely up to you and the appearance that you're looking for. Now, what I'm going to ultimately have to end up doing is ripping these down into 2.5 to 3 inch wide strips so that I can fill everything in. Now, this project board is going to effectively serve as my canvas. And so I'm going to sketch everything out first before I get started. Now my wife wanted a vertical orientation. You can set it up any way that you want. Most people go horizontal. My wife also wanted a 30 by 40. Now a 2x4 is not going to get me that dimension. So once we add the frame, it'll widen it a little bit closer to 30, but I've also trimmed it back from 48 to 40. Again, entirely up to you based on the size that you're looking for. So let's get sketching, and then once we have that done, we'll rip these strips of wood and start putting everything together. So much to my surprise, after I started filming, my wife said that the 30 inches was non-negotiable. So I added another 4.5 on to the end here, of which the frame is then going to take up the additional 1.5 inches to get it to 30. So the next step is I have taken the boards that I'm going to use for the background and ripped them at 3.5 inches wide. I am going to start by marking them out on this project board to give me a feel for how much space I'm going to have to work with. Now I'm not sure if you're going to be able to see the pencil line in the video, but I'm going to mark these down about 50 to 60% of the way down. And I'm just going to use the line that I drew in the previous step as a reference to the next. Okay, with that done, let's start sketching out the mountains. For this mountainscape, I'm going to put in a double range of mountains. So the orientation of the boards will go one direction for the front range, and then they'll go another direction for the back range, all at 45 degrees. So we'll take the speed square, and we'll start marking out at random sort of where we want these mountains to be. Now, one thing I forgot to note is that if you don't account for the width of the boards as you're putting together the design, you're going to end up with mismatched boards in terms of the width. So I'd highly recommend you use the boards as a template as you're creating the mountains. Okay, with the first mountain range done, now we'll put the second range in. All right, I hope you can sort of understand the mess that I just made on this board, but as we put the pieces together, hopefully sort of it'll come into focus. I realize that you probably can't see where I've marked out the mountains here, but once I start putting everything together, it's going to make a lot more sense. So the next thing that I'm going to do is take my boards, I'm just going to move these over to the side, and what I'm going to do is line them up, and then I'm going to use the speed square to mark where I am going to cut these. And it doesn't have to be exact. As a matter of fact, I'm going to go a little bit over, because what I'm going to do is when I'm done with this side, I'm going to run it across my table saw and just make sure that everything is cleanly cut. With the first board cut, I'm going to affix it to this project board using some CA glue and a little accelerator. So I'm going to apply this to the back. Then I'll spray the accelerator on the board. And line everything up. All right. Then we'll lay the next piece down. Make sure it's lined up with the previous board. Again, we'll grab our speed square and line it up, and we'll mark where we're going to make our cut. Now, I've took the other boards, and my wife was not crazy about the gray stain, so I went with a darker Ipswich pine to give it a little bit of contrast. Now, even with these lined up in the opposite direction, you can see that the contrast is still like, it's not great. So what I've done, and I'm not sure if you can notice this, I've run through the planer to take some material off so that we'll have a slight depression between the two mountain ranges. Now, if you don't have a planer, it's not that big a deal. But one of the other things that I'm going to do to accentuate the difference between these mountains is actually cut an 1/8 inch strip off an extra piece of wood at this thickness. And I'm going to run a perimeter that I'm going to paint white all around the mountains. So for the next step, I'm going to cut out this 1/8 inch divider, and then we'll bring it over to the workbench, paint it, and then we'll glue it in place. And then we'll start sizing these up for the mountain range in the back. Now there's one step I forgot about, which is optional, and to be honest, it's probably a bit overkill, but my wife wanted the appearance of almost like shiplap in the background. So I've raised the blade of the saw to about 1/8 of an inch, and I'm just gonna rip a little bit of the corner off these sky boards to again give it that stepped, almost nickel gap appearance. Again, do not feel obligated to do this step. With the front and the rear mountain ranges now glued into place, I've decided that I'm not going to use a little filler row here like I did here, because we're going to get some nice contrast between the blue. And yes, you will notice that I've decided to paint these, as my wife wasn't thrilled with the ebonized wood, which is fine. Now, one thing that I'd like to point out, which I didn't do, but I would highly recommend you do, when we go to lay these out, you want to make sure that the boards evenly bisect the peaks of these mountains. Now, because I didn't do that, as you'll see here, I'm not going to get even spacing between the boards. So I'm going to have to make some precision cuts to make sure that I fill in these troughs here, which is not going to be easy. Now, again, had I thought about it, I could have arranged it such that I had even spacing between the peaks at a full width of the board, just to make things easier. So I'm going to start cutting, and then we'll glue the background into place. With the sky now complete on this scene, it's time to trim the edges so that we can get everything framed up. Now, there are two ways that we can do this. The first of which is we can lay it on this table saw, and if you recall, everything is built on a piece of 1/4-inch plywood. So if you've got an extra piece of plywood laying around, or even a thin board left over from the project, you can use this as a reference point against the edge of the fence, and then you can move your project over the top of that board, assuming that none of your extra boards here go over the width of this, and slide it through. Instead, I'm going to go ahead and use a circular saw, and I'm going to line up my jig here. I'm going to flip everything over. I'm going to line the jig up with the 1/4-inch plywood underneath, and I'm going to zip the pieces off, and we'll be ready to frame. Now, the nice thing about using the back side of this is that we've got the 1/4-inch plywood that we started with to use as a reference point, so this should be pain-free. Now, here's a sample of the 3/4-inch by 1.5-inch stock oak that I'm going to use for the frame. Now, for the material that I'm using, I've stained it dark oak, and it's now drying. Now, what I'm going to do in the meantime is I've taken these 1/2-inch strips of oak that I've cut, and I'm going to back it to this piece, because I'm doing this for two reasons. The first of which is I want to give the piece something more to bite onto. It's really thin around the edges, and so I wanted to build it up a little bit so that I could get it more secure to the frame here. Now, the other thing is, it's also putting these on the back is going to push the piece forward in this frame, which is already 1.5 inches deep. So I do like the sort of general shadow box look, but I don't want it to be too deep. So I'm going to glue these in place, and again, you'll notice this isn't going to go all the way down. It doesn't really matter. So I'm going to get the glue going, and then I'm going to tack these in with a finishing nailer, which I think I've got about a 1/2-inch 18 gauge nails. Okay, the frame pieces have been stained, so I'm going to put them into a corner jig, and I'm not doing miter joints. I'm just going to be kind of overlapping, creating an overlap joint like this. So nothing too fancy. I wanted to give this kind of a rustic look. Now, for the joint adhesive, I'm actually using this is Phenol-Seal, and it's a waterproof caulking, and I'd prefer to use it in this particular case. It's a little bit easier to clean up, and it is, you know, I've stained the wood already, so I don't know actually how great wood glue would actually perform. I know that you can glue stained wood. This is a little bit easier to clean up, and I'm going to tack it together anyway. But what I'm going to do is lay the frame on the table. So essentially I want everything to be flat. Put a few tacks in place on the outside, then I'll flip everything over and tack it again from underneath. The only thing left to do at this point is glue on this crescent moon that I'm going to use to fill up some of this blank space and add a little nighttime touch. Now this is just a piece of 1/8 inch wood that is cut in the shape of a crescent moon I got at a local craft shop. I'm just going to use some hot glue to affix it to the board here. And there we have it. If you like this video, please give me a thumbs up and subscribe. Thanks for watching.